All right, so I think we're ready to start. So, welcome everybody. We have our special guest who's up real early in Redlands, California. Is that where you are right now?
Yep.
Great. And why don't you go ahead, Mason, and just introduce yourself to the class here.
Okay, so hi guys, I'm Mason. I went to RIT for a master's in game design and development from 2021, graduated in 2023, so a little over a year ago. I grew up in Redlands, and so I kind of grew up knowing about Esri and at least knew of the company, didn't necessarily know what they did, but grew up knowing about them. And then as I got older, they became more on my radar as a software development company. And it actually wasn't until I was about 6 months through my first year at RIT that I learned about their game engine development program and applied for an internship. And that's how I ended up here.
Awesome. And now you're a full-time employee at Esri.
Yeah, so I interned the summer of 2022, and then they offered me a verbal, kind of like a verbal offer for a full-time position with the ability to work part-time throughout the school year. So I was still working at Esri through fall of 22 and spring of 23, and then started full-time in June of 23.
Wow, that sounds great. Great deal you got there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you may have already answered, but like we talked about, I had some questions kind of in the similar vein. So why don't I put those on the screen? We may have already covered some of them. Let's see. Yeah. Let's move this out of the way. Okay. Yeah, so you told us your background was IGM. So did you come to RIT specifically because you wanted to learn about game design and development?
Yeah, so I did a bachelor's degree at Whittier College, which is out here in LA, and they didn't actually have a game design program, so I kind of created my own, combining computer science and then some digital design classes and creative art or creative writing classes to make my own game design major. And then just kind of came out of there after graduating not really feeling like I'd be able to get anywhere in the industry. So I chose to pursue a master's degree. Plus, I graduated during COVID, so job market wasn't great at that point.
Okay. And we already covered the second one. So you're from Redlands, California, which for the students in the class, if you weren't aware, it's a city in Southern California that is like the world headquarters of Esri. So it was kind of, I think, an interesting coincidence that you happen to grow up where like the top world GIS company was, and then kind of discovered it along the way. Now, my third question here, this is, I remember when I first met you, I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, you had reached out to me to, so the question was like, after working at Esri, are there any GIS topics, if any, you recommend for learning about geospatial, GIS, and game engines? Like, what about with geospatial, what you recommend if you want to go down this pathway?
Yeah. So coming into the internship, the only thing I knew about Esri was that they made maps, which is a very vague description of what they do. Like I knew of ArcGIS Pro, which is their flagship software, but I didn't really know what it did. I've never touched it, never used it. So I came in to Esri with nothing but game engine knowledge and have learned a lot of GIS since then. So the best thing to do in terms of like what topics to look at would be obviously, study up on the Maps SDKs for Unity and Unreal if you're interested. Most of the scripting in that it's all done through just user interface. You don't actually need to script anything to use the plugin. But then aside from that, probably just familiarize yourself with the different types of data sets you can use. So 3D object scene layers, building scene layers, vector tile layers, feature layers, just the different kinds of data sets that you can use to visualize within Pro or online. Also using ArcGIS online to just kind of go through and look at different layers. It gives you a pretty good understanding of how it's all working together. There's a New York building layer that we use pretty frequently that when you pop it into ArcGIS online, it lets you click on individual buildings and it gives you all of the details for the building, like building name, construction year, what district it's in, all of that kind of stuff. So definitely knowing the difference between the layer types is probably the most important thing. And then from there, you can kind of go anywhere, any direction.
Okay, that's great. And that makes me feel good because I have tried to teach them about different layer types and, you know, their differences. So, all right. The next question was, you know, what software do you use on the game engine team working at Esri? I mean, obviously Unity and Unreal, but what else? Is there other software titles that maybe we haven't covered in the class or you might recommend people learn about?
I mean, those are definitely the two big ones. I know I personally only use Unity, Unreal Engine, and like Visual Studio. But there are other people on the team who use ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online. Some of them use Blender or Maya or anything like that for modeling before bringing something into like ArcGIS Pro or Rivet or anything like that. So it kind of just depends on the path you're interested in going. If you want to primarily do gamification of GIS, I would say Unity and Unreal are your best friends.
Does CityEngine fit into your sort of software ecosystem?
I have not touched CityEngine. I've only seen it at conferences.
Oh, okay. So when you guys create 3D models, are you using ArcGIS Pro to create them or some other tool to then bring it into Unity?
I think so. I have not created a 3D model, but I did do a presentation at user conference in July where one of the guys on the team created a building scene layer to use in that demo. And I think he used a combination of Pro and Rivet. But yeah, I would assume it's Pro and then maybe like Blender or Maya for
Interesting.
actual modeling. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, because I've made some progress in my own learning about CityEngine, and I'm pretty excited about seeing what it can do and then getting it over into Unity. I mean, do you think that's something worth continue to look into?
Oh yeah, definitely. And then I know there's also a CityEngine plugin for Unreal Engine.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have not used it. We're kind of our own. We're off in our own little world on the game engines team.
Okay. And then kind of related to that, my next question was, you know, what programming languages do you recommend learning, especially like, you know, we're in a tech college within the university. This is often an important thing. What languages do you recommend?
So for main development, it would be C# for Unity and C++ for Unreal. And obviously, you know, those are both specific instances of C# and C++. Knowing the basics of either language is definitely good, but you'll want to learn the Unity implementation of C# and the Unreal implementation of C++ because they are slightly different. And then aside from that, Python's good to know. JavaScript is good to know. And Swift would probably be good to at least familiarize yourself with a little bit. Those last three languages are primarily used for doing some like automation stuff within the plugin. So we have to use those scripting languages for like packaging our plugin before we use it, or getting our support files so that we have the proper binaries so that it recognizes runtime core, stuff like that.
Okay, great. That's good advice. Now, my next question is, we're sort of in a current phase of, you know, we're in the AI era. Like that's sort of the buzz thing now. ChatGPT, large language models. They're talking about how it's going to really revolutionize computing. Here at RIT, there's huge discussions about how it's going to impact introductory programming courses. And I'm going to frankly use it in this class. So how is it, if all, is AI kind of things like that impacting your work at Esri and on the games engine?
It really hasn't as of yet. Esri's been pretty open about the use of ChatGPT to a point where they kind of created their own variant of ChatGPT. Like there's a ChatGPT for Esri employees specifically, but it is running, and it's not GPT-4. It's running an older version of GPT. So for the most part, I don't use it. I know there's some people that do use it within Esri, and I don't believe they're using it for actually writing code. They're more so using it for checking, implementation. Hey, is there a better way for me to do this specific thing? And the only time I've ever used it was for correcting my grammar. So it really hasn't affected us too much. But with that said, with the rise of Apple Intelligence, and most people at Esri have iPhones, and the new Google Pixels and Samsungs are coming with their own AI. It's inevitable that it's going to somehow affect us at some point.
Okay. And another question then, in the School of Interactive Games and Media, there's been a lot of buzz about digital twins and Omniverse. Now, I've learned a little bit about digital twins, but I'm still trying to learn about Omniverse. Can you teach us or tell us about any of your experience with digital twins or Omniverse?
Yeah, digital twins I can definitely get into. Omniverse is a little trickier because I'm not super familiar with it. The only interaction I've ever had with it is I went to game technology conference with Rex up in San Jose, and that was NVIDIA's conference, and so they talked a lot about Omniverse and all of the graphics technology that goes into running Omniverse and stuff like that. As far as digital twins go, it's a small world that describes something that's truly just gigantic. I mean, digital twins are as small as just recreating a building within your application so that you can visualize it in 3D, or if you want to use augmented reality. But like the primary way that we're talking about it is when we use virtual reality or AR or mixed reality to go through and visualize something so that you can see it as though you're in that scene. We did a presentation as part of the plenary at Dev Summit in March, where my manager, Adrian, went through and set up this big scene with a building scene layer of Esri's campus, and then added, game engine assets, so cars and people and all that kind of stuff. And then I went into virtual reality and I went into mixed reality, showed it off in a tabletop format. And then we had a digital representation or digital twin of another person viewing the same scene from virtual reality. And you could see him standing in my scene in order to actually visualize him. And then we were all looking at the same digital twin of the building scene layer, just from very different perspectives.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. Kind of a sort of related question that I'm personally been wondering about, the idea of like there being sensors. Like right now when this video is being recorded, there's a massive hurricane that's approaching Florida. If I had like weather data and other sensors connected, like let's just say hypothetically buildings on the coast had sensors about weather, wind speed, and we wanted to connect that to a digital representation, would that also be considered a digital twin, like the real-time integration of sensor data?
Yeah, totally. And I actually have a demonstration that shows exactly that in Unity.
Okay.
I'm not sure it would be covering Florida, but
Yeah,
it is weather data of weather stations from across the world that you can then, click on a location and it'll move your map and your camera and show you, like, give a visualization of the weather happening within that area.
Okay, cool. We'll look forward to seeing that. So those are my questions. Now, do any of the students, do you guys have questions for them? You could tell me and I could relay it to them. Don't be shy. I mean, if you got something you want to ask them? Oh, well, yes. Yeah. I can't hear you. Just, yeah, well, here, you can rock them. It's going to be recorded though, so if you don't want to be on camera, you can just tell me too.
Oh, I was just saying, like, being at a school without like a GIS major, like, how would he suggest we differentiate ourselves between other schools and other candidates that do have a GIS major?
Okay, so the question was, we do not have a GIS degree here at RIT, so how might we a student like applying for a job or something, for a GIS kind of job, how would you distinguish yourself in the marketplace from other students that maybe are coming from a degree program, like a GIS degree program, like geography or something?
Yeah, like other schools have.
Sure. Yeah. Did you get that, Mason?
Yeah. I mean, biggest thing is, don't get me wrong, I'm not in a GIS position, but I did not have a GIS background prior to applying to or starting to work at Esri. But in terms of if you want a GIS specific position, probably the best way to distinguish yourself would to be obviously having this class listed on your resume, and then having individual projects that you did in this class or keeping up with it outside of class, to have examples of, like, hey, I'm not in a GIS program, but I'm interested in GIS specifically, and then going that route. That would definitely, I think that would be the best advice I have for that. I don't really know anyone who did a GIS bachelor's, but I do know a couple people that are in the process of getting a GIS master's right now. And they are also in geography positions. One of them's on the pro team as a kind of like a documentation type of person. She makes tutorials on how to use new features in pro.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah, and I would just add quickly, emphasize computing, that you've taken a class like this. You can, even a little bit of Python, whatever your comfort level, that will distinguish you between other people that don't either have that background or haven't experienced it even in this kind of environment. So great question. Okay, anybody else have a question? Yeah.
I was just going to ask, what other types of disciplines do you work with other than technology related?
Yeah. Did you catch that? So what other disciplines do you work with other than technology disciplines?
Can you clarify disciplines, what you mean by that?
So it's like someone who's not necessarily like into coding, software engineering, like what other disciplines do you work with, or does Esri employ that aren't specifically coding related, software engineering, computer science, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Did you catch that?
Yeah. So the biggest thing would be, as someone in my position, I'm not a software engineer at Esri, I'm a product engineer, and that there is a little bit of a difference between the two, but I'm definitely closer to a software engineer, product engineer than a product engineer, if that makes any sort of sense. But biggest thing would be, as a product engineer, you are expected to write documentation, as well as just kind of be familiar with the software. Documentation is the biggest one, but then there's people on our team who although are capable of coding, they primarily focus more on like making data sets that we can then use for demos or anything like that. There's people who focus specifically on making user interface, whether it's for the actual plugin or for like our samples. I'll show those off in a little bit, and you'll see the user interface we have for those. So there's definitely a lot of places you can fit in at Esri. But yeah, the aside from like my team specifically, Esri is a global company with probably upwards of 10,000 employees. I can't imagine that all of us know how to code or are interested in technology. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Do you, in terms of like sort of computing that doesn't necessarily get into coding, do you work with HCI people, human computer interaction, user experience, user design? Does that come up?
User experience and user design definitely does come up. I don't personally work with them. But there are people on our team who do, specific, like the person I mentioned who like does user interface design. They're more so thinking about that kind of stuff. And then obviously a person like Rex, who is Rex is a product manager, so he's kind of in charge of the game engines team in terms of like customer feedback. He'll talk with customers, communicate that to us, and then we'll kind of redesign or design based off of the feedback. Those two guys are the people who are primarily dealing with that kind of stuff.
Just to back up, I don't think we actually formally asked you, like, just, what is a product engineer? Like, if I were to meet you at a party and say, hey, what do you do for a living? How would you describe it?
That's a great question, because I really do fall on like the 50-50 line. So product engineer, mainly my main job is to know how to use our software. And then from there, I need to be able to create and design samples demonstrating how to use our software. I need to be able to troubleshoot bugs and issues using our software. I need to, at a minimum, be familiar with our code repository so that if there is an issue, I know how to find it. I'm in charge of, or at least a part of, the certification process. So we release 3 times a year, and the last 2 weeks leading up to our release is going through and quite literally stress testing every possible thing you can think of. The doc we have is probably 4 pages, and that's just for Unity, and then we have another 4 pages for Unreal. And then there's also sub docs within that doc. But those are the big ones that I do. I definitely fit a little bit more into development than I do product engineer. So I'll also work within the code repo. So the last couple of weeks, I have been updating some of our internal components to use Unity's new input system, so that we're compliant and we support both old and new input system. And then there's some other stuff. I also do presentations and demos and stuff like that. So I've presented at Dev Summit and User Conference, which are the probably 2 biggest conferences Esri hosts. I know that they host a couple of different Dev Summits each year, but the one in Palm Springs is, I believe, the largest. And then User Conference is obviously like 20,000 people.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Thanks for that explanation, because I get a sense of that now. Like when we look at like the web page for the SDK, like I feel like that's your job in part, is to really get that together, make sure everything's available. Yeah. Not to oversimplify.
It falls under product engineer, but I don't personally work on it. The 2 people next to me do. But the two guys next to me are also product engineers, and they do a bit more of the doc side of things, whereas I do a bit more of the software side of things.
Okay, cool. We've got plenty of time. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Just in general, do you have any function, like, does it, anything related to image processing? Okay, the question was from an imaging science student, correct? Does the SDK or any of that have anything related to image processing? I might call it raster analysis. Is there anything, right? Is that your question? Yeah, is there anything like that kind of functionality in the game engine world?
I don't believe so. I know that we obviously support base maps and vector tile layers, which are both different forms of images. And then we also support regular image layers too. But I don't believe there's anything like you're asking available right now. I'd have to look more into it. I can look more into it and send a follow-up email.
Okay. Now, just as a follow-up to brainstorm, what if I was interested, I'm trying to make something up on the spot here, but like I wanted to do a real-time, I have an image of a flooded area in my digital twin, and I wanted to run like a classification on it to find flooded areas. Can I hook up like functionality, say from ArcGIS or where those libraries might exist, and kind of wire those into Unity and the game engine environment?
I don't believe so. The game engine's SDK operates within Runtime Core, which is a giant library of functions and features that you can use within C# or C++. So if it's available within Runtime Core, absolutely. But I don't believe we support any plugging in from other applications or software to use additional functionality. Now, if you can export the data in one of the supported types that we have, or even if it's unsupported and you're willing to, write a complex way of analyzing it, you can definitely visualize it within the game engines. So for instance, like feature layer, that's not currently supported within the SDK, but we have added additional functionality within both Unity and Unreal of supporting feature layer to a certain extent.
Okay. So I would just, as a final comment on your question, that could be an opportunity, right? You could experiment around with using, I don't know, maybe like to use MATLAB or something. And so if MATLAB could do an analysis on an image and then export it, you could then try to take the exported product and bring it in somehow with one of these things. So, I mean, I think that's the exciting, is being creative about what you can do. So thanks for the question. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have a favorite feature that isn't very well known? Something that maybe people overlook, like a feature like ArcGIS Pro or the SDK that you use on a regular basis that you just really enjoy? That's super useful.
Just to confirm, that was, do I have a favorite feature within the SDK or Pro or any other piece of software?
Yes, that was the question.
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Favorite feature that I don't necessarily get to use on a daily basis, but I do have fun with every time I use it, is we support pretty much every VR, AR, XR headset you can think of. And I get Christmas presents like randomly on the middle of the year, which is definitely kind of fun. So I've gotten to do some cool stuff with a whole lot of headsets. So that would probably be my favorite thing that I get to do in terms of features. Ooh, building scene layers are definitely really, really cool. And there's a lot that you can do within building scene layers, both scripting wise and just using the plugin bare bones. So I'll show some of that off in a little bit too. But that would probably be favorite feature. Again, I don't necessarily use it every day, but it is something that's really cool and exciting when I do get to use it.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
GIS interview. One thing I need to know for interview.
For an interview. Okay. This is maybe a broader question, but Mason, maybe you could help with this. If you get an interview like with Esri, right? That's what you're at. Like
GIS.
a GI, maybe Esri or a GIS interview. Any advice on how to be successful with the interview or how to do a good interview?
Sure. Is there a specific position or just generic interview tips for interviewing with Esri?
Anything to do with GIS, like GI petition, like GI analyze.
Okay. I think he's asking about general, maybe a GIS analyst type position.
Okay. So I didn't do a GIS interview with a GIS team, but in general for the internship interviews, it's just one interview with either whoever your mentor is going to be or your manager is going to be, or someone who is closely affiliated with the team. So I did not interview with my manager for the internship position. I interviewed with Rex, who handles the coordinating with the internship program for whether or not we're going to take an intern. And then that's just a pretty generic interview. They ask you, the normal suite of questions, and then obviously they'll ask you about your background and where you see yourself in X number of years and all that kind of stuff. In terms of interviewing for a full-time position, that is a little bit more in depth. You interview with each person on the team you're applying for. So I had a total of, I want to say 8 interviews for my full-time position, including a technical interview. I doubt you'd have to go through a technical interview if you're doing a GIS position. And then you'll interview with every person on the team, and then you will also interview with whoever the kind of head of your department is. So for my instance, I had to interview with Ewan Cameron, who is the CTO of Esri. Definitely when you're 23 and applying for your first job, that's pretty nerve-wracking hearing you have to interview with the CTO, but it's really not as scary as you think it is. For the most part, he just let me ask questions to him about like what it's like working at Esri, what's the growth path for if you are working at Esri, like how do you get promoted and stuff like that. So it's a pretty nice process. Like it's definitely been one of the least nerve-wracking set of interviews I've had to do, but I also had the benefit of interviewing with my team after working with everyone on the team for 3 months.
All right. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right. Anything else you want to ask before we get into demos? All right, so enough talk. Let's look at some stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna stop this screen share, and then we'll do that. And then you should, let me just see how much am I doing on disk space here. Oh, I'm good. Yeah, don't want to run out of disk space. Okay, so Mason, take it away. So yeah, show us. I think it's really now that I've learned that you're really like the guy for like understanding how this thing all works and showing it to people. I'm excited to see what you have to show us.
Sure. Did you want me to go through the API key stuff?
Yes. We tried that. I've been stumped. We wanted to create an API key through our ArcGIS Online, and it doesn't give us the option to do so.
Okay. So I think this is my API key.
Yeah.
So you'll want to go to developer.arcgis.com.
Yeah.
And then from here, you'll sign in. I think because you have a older account, you'll
Okay.
have to go through the upgrade process of upgrading it to the newer account. I think I had to do that too after they launched the new developer portal.
Now, I found, just as a comment, I asked the students to do the same thing. Do you guys remember on class on Tuesday, I asked you to look to see if you could generate an API key? Does anybody remember that? And you were not able to do so?
We didn't go to this page. We don't know.
All right. Okay. So yeah, you're right, Mason. It could be that I am literally old and I've had an account for a long time. So, but that's how you're supposed to do it, right? You go.
Well, here, I'll go ahead and I'll just create a new account
Okay.
so we can go through the whole process. I'll sign in with my Esri email. Okay, maybe I won't sign in with my Esri email. I'll just use my RIT one.
Okay. So now you are like an RIT student, or they kick you out?
Yeah, they're not letting me. Okay, we'll go back to. Okay, let's find. I don't even see create an account on here.
Yeah, I think in the sign in, you can create an account.
Okay. Okay, I'll just go ahead and create an account real quick.
So I'm wondering if this, what you're showing us, could be a sort of back doorway while we're working on the internal RIT plumbing of ArcGIS Online. I wonder if the students could just go outside of RIT, create an account like you're doing, just to grab an API key. That might be a sort of a workaround, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably what I would do, and it's not sending me the email for whatever reason. So, yeah, I'm not too sure, but I'll still go through and just show the new setup for.
Yeah, show us how it should work, and then we'll try to. This is what we will aspire to.
So I will say it used to be a lot easier to get to the API keys. Now there's like 4 different menus you have to go through, unfortunately.
Yep.
So. Okay. Okay, here we go. So when you sign in and go to your organization up here, you'll see API keys and you can click view all. And then from here, you'll want to go down to developer credentials and then API key credentials. I don't think it'll let you create a legacy API key. I think that just shows your existing legacy API keys. So you'll click on API key, and then from here, you can click new item, developer credentials.
Yep. Yeah. We don't. Yeah. Okay. We don't see that API key to create it. So that's the issue I think we're trying to figure out here at RIT.
Ooh, okay.
Because you have to have some kind of special account setting, and so forth. So
interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
But that's what you showed. Yeah, look into it if you have time to figure that out.
Yeah, I'll talk to Rex or Adrian and try and figure something out. But yeah, so this is Unity, and then have you guys looked at the UI, the map creator?
We did. I did the basic introduction for the students who were here on Tuesday. We went through and we fired up the UI. So, some of the students in the class are game development students, some of them are not. So some are quite familiar with Unity, others probably saw it for the very first time. So that's kind of, I at least showed them Unity a little bit. And so that hopefully it's not completely foreign at this point. Yeah.
All right, well, I'll just jump right into it. So this is our sample viewer, and it's nothing too crazy. It's just a nice little list of all of our samples so that you don't have to go through each one individually. But I guess I'll just pick one. So this is our building filter sample, which is a building scene layer. It's one of the data sets that we natively support within the Unity and Unreal SDK. And then with this UI, we can go ahead and kind of just toggle on and off different parts of the actual building. So if we just want to see the structural and electrical, we can completely toggle off architecture. And this is actually a building on Esri's campus. So this is the rest of Esri's campus right here. And then you can also look at the different construction phases, which is pretty cool. So you can see it, slowly kind of be disassembled. And then you can also look at specific levels of the building. So that's the 5th floor, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. And then we also have the ability, so if you have your own building scene layer you want to look at, you can pop it in here. I don't think I have one handy, unfortunately, but you can pop it in here and it'll completely move the map for you. You don't have to deal with repositioning everything. This sample is also one of our interns from this past summer actually did it. So he did a really great job with it. And then this is the feature layer sample. This is one of the ones I was talking about earlier. I'll make this a little bigger. So a feature layer is kind of just a set of points that have attributes associated with them. So when I click on this dropdown, this is all of the attributes associated with the features that we can then go and look at. And if I go ahead and process it, it shows us all of the features. And this is a feature layer for trees within LA. So we're just using a pin to try and keep it as generic so people can pop in different service URLs and see it. But yeah, we can go through and if we go into the scene view and
so just to be clear, so that's a feature layer, basically a vector that you're able to use the C# code to get at the attributes of the incoming feature layer and then use values to do something with the values?
Yeah. So we're not doing anything with the actual properties, but you can click on any of these feature items. I mean, this is a list of over 2,000 of them, but you can click on one and, we can see the Unity gizmo here to see where it is, and it's highlighted. But then if we click on the actual properties here, we can see all of the properties and the attributes associated with them. So we know, I'm not sure what 3 is in terms of height, but it has a height of 3. And then we can see, the street that it's on. All of this stuff this is all essentially data. And then we can also see the coordinates for where it is exactly if we wanted to go and look at that area.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is not one of the data types we support natively in the SDK, but this is one of the ones where we had to write some extra code to get it working. And I can show what that actually looks like a little later. Moving on, this is geocoding. So essentially you can you can press shift and click and it'll show you the address where it is. So you can do that for pretty much anywhere. And then this is reverse geocoding. So we can type in an address. And it'll show us where it is. So this is again Esri's campus. Yeah, that is geocoding. It's nothing too crazy. This is a relatively new sample. This is the geometry sample, and essentially this is a way to measure within game engine space. So we can just shift and click in order to kind of figure out where, what the distance is. So right now it's measuring in miles. And then we can also do this. So it'll let us create a shape. And then it'll give us the square mileage. And then similarly, we can click and, that's a bug. So you can click and drag.
Oh.
And it'll give you the square mileage as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's geometry sample. That's one of our newer samples. It's currently only in Unity, but we will add it into Unreal soon. And then this is our hit test sample. This is a work in progress. This is something I'm currently working on. So hopefully within like a little bit, it'll be completely redesigned, but you can click on a building and it'll give you, this is the feature ID associated with that building. So what I'm working on right now is making it so that it gives you something other than the feature ID. So it'll work similarly to the feature layer sample I just showed off, where you can kind of go through and select a property. So for instance, the district, and then when you click on a building, it'll show you the district for that building rather than just a random arbitrary number.
It's kind of like the identify tool in Pro.
Yep, that's kind of what we're mimicking it after.
Yeah.
This is a line of sight sample. So we have a 3D object scene layer that is just buildings. And then the little pink dot with the red line, that is a raycast, which is a game engine specific feature. So it's drawing a line from the dot to the car, and then when there's something blocking the line of sight, it turns red, and when it can see the car, it turns green. So this just kind of demonstrates, hey, you can, combine this, you can combine GIS and game engine data, and it works. So moving on, this was originally a sample that was provided within the plugin. We moved it over to our public samples. So this is getting a list of attributes associated with the buildings, and then it's applying a material over the building. So right now it's checking to see it's checking the names of the buildings, and if it is the Chrysler building or the New World Trade Center, it's applying a building material over them. And then we can switch it to be the construction year. So if it's constructed before the year 2000, it will be orange. And if it's constructed after the year 2000, it renders blue. And then we can obviously just look at it without any shaders on it whatsoever. And
we got a question. Well, hang on, we got a question about that one.
Sure.
Go back to that example.
Could you go back to that one?
Yeah, so what type of file holds information on what year the building was constructed?
So the question is, like, you have the features, the buildings, they have their attributes. What is that a 3D object scene layer?
Yeah, that's a 3D object scene layer. And then this is the script that it's looking at. So there's actually two scripts involved with this one. There's a script that's creating the actual map. And then from that script, this is working in tandem with that one. So instead of going through the map creator to create the map, it creates the map using C#. And then from here, it's pretty much comes down to these two functions, this setup 3D attributes float and integer type, and then setup 3D attributes other type, where it's going through and it's creating a ArcGIS immutable array. This one is of strings. This one's also of strings up here. And then you can type in construction year and name, and it goes through and it checks the name of each building, and then it's actually within the shader, which thankfully I have open. But within the shaders, it's checking to see what the name is, and if it is true, it will render this texture over it. Or for the construction year, it's checking to see if it's below the year 2000, and if it's true, it renders it orange. If it's false, it renders it blue. Or I guess switch the if statement. So if it's greater than 2000, it's blue. Does that make sense?
And you've been interested in thematic mapping. That's kind of like it's not, yeah, that's basically a version of that. Thanks for showing us. That's cool.
Yeah.
See a little more of the guts of it too.
The measure sample is the same as the geometry sample, except it only measures straight lines. So then routing sample, you can click on the map and it'll route you whatever the fastest route is. So this is just New York or Long Island right here. So
now that's pretty cool. So like, because sometimes with routing, there's a lot of overhead with having access to certain services. So you get that kind of thing sort of for free with an API key.
This is running through the REST API, I believe. So it's
Okay.
also running through a script. It's additional on top of the SDK, so you do have to do some scripting to get it working. But yeah, it's additional functionality that you can use within the SDK. It uses a combination of the querying the REST API and then using the game engine functionality.
Okay, interesting.
So then this one is this is a stream layer, so similar to a feature layer, except instead of using a feature layer, this is a stream layer, which they're different but similar. Instead of using an HTTP request for this, we use a WebSockets request. And this is a list of planes that are active. I'm not sure where the plane went. I just saw it. But
cool.
You can click on the planes and kind of see where they are in the world for where they're flying to. We are simulating the flying mechanics, so if you just queried it, it wouldn't actually be moving. We're predicting the direction it's moving.
So that's really cool. So is that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, is that like an API that like a data, like an open data kind of API about flight data that you're just kind of ingesting in and then rendering out?
Yeah, so it's the data itself is hosted in a WebSocket that is pretty much constantly being updated.
Yeah.
And it is something you can go and view in like ArcGIS online.
Okay.
So it'll show you, what it's looking at basically, or what it looks like. And then we're just adding the simulation of moving them.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah. So then we have a third person controller, which is essentially just, this is Mapman. He falls through buildings apparently. But yeah, he's a third person character controller that can run around. This is San Francisco, if it doesn't fall through a building. But yeah, so you can run around San Francisco and jump off buildings, and this is the closest thing to like gamification of GIS that we have in terms of samples. We do have a VR sample, which is very similar to this, but it's in VR instead of a third-person perspective. Our sample of Unreal for the third-person sample has a little bit more, has some extra features. You can fly in order to get around a little bit quicker.
Now, I have a rookie. I remember when I first started playing with Unity, I was able to, I don't even know how I did it, but I figured similar out. I found a free asset of an avatar, brought it into Rochester. Do you have to do something special to kind of give a, because I remember my guy too would just float indefinitely. Did you have to put some kind of ground down, like so the avatar has like a surface? Is that how it prevents him from just falling through everything?
So we actually have a function within our within the script that controls him that is checking to see if the map has finished loading.
Okay.
And then once it has finished loading, it lets him fall, and we have the mesh colliders turned on within the map creator.
Mesh colliders. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That could be a good little piece of advice later. Yeah. Okay.
And then last but not least, this is the weather sample I mentioned earlier. This is it's querying a feature layer that then grabs the city data and populates it into this dropdown, and then it shows you what the weather is for different areas. Not sure if sound is coming through, but I assure you
I heard lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can just click on different cities and it'll show you the current weather. You can change between Celsius and Fahrenheit. It'll show you the latitude, longitude of it. And you can just go through various different cities. I'm sure there's a Florida one on here, but here's Los Angeles just because I know where Los Angeles is. So yeah, this is the normal samples project. We do have virtual reality samples or XR samples as well, and we have one that works on the MetaQuest 3 using augmented reality or pass-through, so you can see your surroundings, and it shows a virtual tabletop where you can move the map around and stuff. So most of these samples are something that I have worked on at some point. I definitely focus a little bit more on Unreal Engine than Unity, but I do work with both pretty regularly. So.
Okay. Super cool. So if we wanted to get the samples viewer, does that come with when we download the way we do it is at least the way I showed them, we take the SDK tarball and we load that in, and then we load the samples from the tarball. Does that get us to the sample viewer, or should we go to GitHub to do that?
You should go to GitHub. I'll send the link in the chat. So yeah, you can download this project. You can just go to code and then download zip file. And then once you download it, you can go into Unity Hub and click add project from disk and, figure out where it is. Mine, because I cloned it from GitHub, since I have edit access, mine's just under my name directory. And then you'll just click on the project and then, you just click on the project and click add project and it'll add it.
Okay, cool.
Within that repository is also the VR samples. So if you want to check those out, I'd show you, but I don't think they're going to show well on Zoom, and I don't know where my headset is. But yeah, and then there's Unity and Unreal, so you can check either one out if you're interested. Unreal does have a bit more of a in-depth setup process. It's not quite as easy as just opening the project and adding the plugin. You have to add the plugin before opening the project and then build the solution file, and then you can actually open the project.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, we've been going for about an hour now, so thank you for those of you that are still engaged with this. Were there any questions about the samples or anything that you just saw that were curious about? I think it was a good mix of high level, and then he did drill into some kind of deeper, at least to me, some deeper tech stuff. So, cool. Any other questions in general? Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between geocoding and reverse geocoding?
Oh, here comes a midterm exam question. What's the difference between geocoding and reverse geocoding?
That's a good question. So geocoding is you are querying the location. When for the sample specifically, geocoding is you're clicking on the map and it is telling you the location that you just clicked on. So when you're in, Google Maps or something and you click on a location, that's geocoding. But when you go into the search bar and type in an address and it shows you where it is, that's reverse geocoding.
Okay. All right, cool. Any other questions? Okay, how about I'll ask you one question, a profound question. What is the vision? Where do you see this all going? Like, where do you see game engines, geospatial? What's the big picture of it all? Where is it all headed to?
That's a good question. I do think with the game engines SDKs, at least, they are working towards having essentially all of the features that like Pro has. So not sure what the plans are, but there is a big update coming next year, and we just haven't been told what we're going to be in charge of adding for it yet. But in terms of GIS is everywhere. It's not going anywhere. You're using it even when you don't think you're using it. So when you go to order a mobile pickup through the Starbucks app, you're using GIS to figure out what the closest Starbucks location is to you. So it's everywhere. It's not going anywhere. Jack has worked a little too hard to get Esri to where it is currently for GIS to just suddenly die out of nowhere. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, great. Hi, this is Brian Tomaszewski. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and share this video. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification icon to stay up to date on new videos from this channel. Thanks for watching.